Well, welcome everyone to Money and Meaning, Kinder Institute of Life Planning's blog, where we tell the stories of registered life planners from around the globe. I'm Lora Woodward, Communications Director. This is our I'm a Registered Life Planner series, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by the one and only George Kinder, founder and president of Kinder Institute of Life Planning. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Laura. Great to be here.
So George, you have a new book project coming out that's been 30 years in the making. And I want to take some time to dive into what you're doing and why it might be relevant to financial life planners and perhaps a model for actually living into our own life plans. So let's start by having you share a bit about your latest project and what it means to you.
Well, I think the life planning piece is really interesting because when you talk about 30 years, this is a vision I've had for 30 years and even longer in terms of delivering something really quite special. And I mean, it's a funny thing. I don't know how to say it, Laura. The book that I'm working on now I view it as my legacy. And yet at the same time, when I contrast it with all the work that you and I have done at Kinder Institute, that Kinder Institute has done, clearly that's a huge legacy for an old fellow like me and, to have in life. But there was something that I carried with me from early days that I really was passionate about doing, that kind of the workaday world didn't capture or didn't allow. And so one of the really funny things about it, one of the strange things about life planning that we don't explore enough is why is it we haven't done our life plan? How is it that every client who comes into our office has something there that they've held back from? So when you ask me, what this is about, 30 years in the making, I had something that I was holding back from. And often for many people, it has to do with family or healing a relationship or, doing something innocuous or simple, but you'd never mention it to anybody else. And for me, it was that who knows what an illuminated manuscript is? And that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to create an illuminated manuscript. You've written a bit about my life plan, and the truth is that in the third question, for 30 or 40 years, I had three elements, and they just kept coming up again and again and again. Occasionally, another element would come up. Occasionally, one of them would float out, but three elements over and over again. And they were that I wanted to live in the weather. And then the second thing was that I wanted to do an illuminated manuscript. And the third thing was that I wanted to lead a deeply spiritual life. So when you take those three things and you contrast them with, kind of being a businessman and, doing, giving financial advice, being a financial planner, and then running an institute and trying to help financial planners all over the world to become better planners. None of those things feel directly relevant. And so it was easy to kind of keep it hidden. And for me not to deliver it into the world. And it took a couple of our great trainers to go at me and say, you got to put this out there, man. You're not walking the talk. One of them was Ed Jacobson. He was the man who gave me the big charge. And then Louis has just been so supportive. Louis Volbrecht, so supportive of it all. And I call it his enormous generosity of listening. He just has a way of listening that's just makes you feel very, very special, very honored to be there with him in his presence. So, those three things, there's a way in which they're all natural. I know you love being in nature. You go off and you go on your adventures, and I hardly know how to describe them, but you do them by yourself and you do them with others, and you lead people into nature. So you and I share that. But there's something, I don't know I don't know what it is. Anyway, I felt that, well, okay, I share that with people, but this was living in the weather. I came to realize that living in the weather was the same thing as living a deeply spiritual life. Mm. And that was an astonishing recognition that living in the weather means really our senses are alive. That walk on the beach, that trip where the whole island is yours. You canoed out to it and it's yours. And just the moisture in the air, the heat or the coolness. And what I came to realize by intermingling that with mindfulness practice is that mindfulness is all about living in your senses. It's bringing your awareness to each moment. And each moment is each moment of smelling, each moment of seeing, each moment of hearing, each moment of sensing. So I came to realize that living in the weather was identical to living in my senses. It was just one layer out. And that made the project of doing an illuminated manuscript with photography and poetry, which is what my book is, really interesting. What is it that I'm really talking about there? And I came to realize that living in the present moment, which is also, as you know, everybody knows that's a big deal to me. I think most people do. That also is about living in the weather, and that I could somehow communicate that through a mix of poetry and photography in a series of 2-page spreads that might not only satisfy my yearning to deliver that out into the world, but also might help other people to learn more about their own relationship to nature, to the present moment, to mindfulness practice, and also to culture, to poetry and photography, to art, to artistic design, to challenge themselves around whether they like what I've done or don't like what I've done, to come out and go, well, wow, I want to do this on my own. I want to practice on my own, or I want to now go off and visit these places and do these things. So it always was about a gift, I think, externally to others. But anyway, I don't know what else to tell you. It's been an incredible journey for 30 years writing a poem, so that every single day of the year has a poem or multiple poems. Every single day of the year has multiple photographs. And then I'm doing a weekly edition of 52 things, weeks, and then a daily edition of each season, 90 days per season, basically, 91 days per season, so that people can really dive in and experience nature through this process of meditation, of poetry, and photography on a pond. Yeah.
Well, George, I'd say I don't know how you do it, but I have a little window into how you do it, and it's just incredible how you're really living your life plan. And I'm curious, for all of our listeners and viewers, what does it actually mean to live your life plan?
Yeah, it's and again, in the early days, Kinder Institute wasn't part of my life plan. It was how I was making a living. And I knew that what I wanted to do in making that living was still to live an inspired life even there. And so it was natural for me to think about this question of freedom in relation to life planning and financial work for myself, and then for everybody that I encountered. And over time, that became a huge passion, which was really quite wonderful to be able to balance with this other world where I felt hidden and closeted away, basically, and not telling anybody about it, and keeping a boundary, a private side inside myself. Living your life plan, I mean, this is an extraordinary thing for me to go public, to share it publicly. A few life planners have known it. The ones that have studied with me the most have clearly known it. But now I'm sharing it, it's out there. And but living your life plan and sharing it are two separate things, potentially, perhaps, and living the life plan prior to sharing it. I would say the most extraordinary thing about making sure that you live that life plan, and I did it, Lora, I mean, I'd squirrel away 4, 6, 8 hours a day just for my life plan, not for Kinder Institute. And so it meant that all morning, basically, through lunchtime, I would have for photography, for poetry, for meditation practice, for living in nature, living in the wilderness that I could find. And then I would come and dive into with the same passion because I felt so energized and alive by living my life plan. What could be better than that? So it is exhilarating to live your life plan. It's exciting. And I think the other piece to it is that there's a deepness to it. There's a deepening to it that has to do with authenticity, has to do with just really being here. That if you're more likely to be here in the moment, almost certainly, if you're living your life plan, than if you're not. And if you're here in the moment, you're going to be so much more here for everyone else and for everything else that you do. So I think those would be the main things. You're alive, you've got a vitality, and there's no questioning, what is the meaning of life? Why am I doing this? What is this all about? And one of the great things about COVID, as horrible as it's been in so many ways, is that, as you know, I've dived into my life plan during that time. So that time has been just as rich as any other time.
Yeah, I've absolutely seen you do that. And you mentioned boundaries and how important it is to establish those boundaries so that you can bring that energy that comes from living your life plan into all aspects of your life. And I've definitely been witness to that. And that's part of why for every training that we do, we actually have financial advisors go through the life planning process. You have to be life planned yourself in order to then go out and deliver life planning methodology to clients. So why is it so important that life planners have to do this? They have to be life planned and actually live into their own life plan.
Well, it's really interesting you're asking that question. And of course, I mean, I am constantly relooking at the things. And there's it's not really superficial, but it's superficial compared to that's something else I'm going to say. There's a superficial reason that's very important for all of us, and that is the business model works much better because of that authenticity, because you are living your life plan. It means that you reek of it, so to speak. I mean, people can smell it in you. They know that you are, you're passionate about what you do and you live it. And it also gives you a way of being there for the other person where you have patience with them because it was tough to deliver your life plan into the world. There was a reason why you had to get life plan to be able to do it. There was a barrier, a boundary somewhere there that just basically you couldn't quite get through all by yourself. So that authenticity comes through, the client feels it and they trust you. So that's the reason that the financial model works for you, your business model works, because all financial advice is based on trust. And there's no more trustworthy advisor than a registered life planner. So it's because they're living that. But there's a deeper side to that. I said that's not superficial at all, but it's superficial compared to this deeper side that I've been thinking about just recently. And that is that, Lora, I think what we're doing here in these trainings is we're actually training people in wisdom, training life planners in wisdom. You think about what is wisdom and how do you learn it and how do you train it? And I think that that without us accessing who we feel we are meant to be, who we long to be, who we've always wanted to be, who deep inside we know we were meant to be, how can we even think about conveying wisdom to other people? How can we think about being there for ourselves without being there for ourselves in that way? And then if you think about that, if someone has that reservoir of authenticity and wisdom inside of them, then that comes out not only to our clients, that again, they can read it in us, they feel it in us, but it also comes out to our partners, to our spouses, our kids, our parents, our brothers and sisters, our communities. We are here in a way that people are more likely to turn to us and listen to us, because we've listened inside ourselves and we haven't held ourselves back, but we've gone, no, I'm going to do this. So we've got the depth of quiet listening. We've also got that energy that can inspire others to move forward into their lives. So it's that trust level, and then the ability to do every aspect that a client needs us to do in order to get them energized and authentic in their own lives.
Right. Yeah. Wow. We better write down that new thinking, George.
I think so.
So I know that you practice as a financial planner and a tax advisor, and this is a little bit prior to Kinder Institute, but you were still trying to balance these life plan elements. So how can you help other financial planners out there who might be struggling with really kind of keeping the priority on living their life plan when there's so many competing agendas out there?
Yeah, nothing's more important.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's more important than that for everybody, for each of us. And I was lucky. But somehow I had a passion from childhood, and it was a passion not just for freedom, but for everybody living in freedom. And it was passion for, so I think nowadays the term for it might be justice, but it was a passion to, I don't know, to not give up on what was most important to me in terms of myself. And not to have that taken away. The world is a hard place for most of us. It certainly was for me, and I think it's hard for everybody. And I know for so many people, it's much harder than it was for me, given the privileges that I grew up with. But the world is a hard place, and it demands that we go into its cookie cutter, configurations. And often they feel like a greater and greater level of confinement and a loss of who we feel we're meant to be. So I suppose it made me angry. But I was passionately determined that I wasn't going to be cut into some mold. Maybe it was part of the 60s. I don't know. I was passionately determined that I was not going to be cut into some mold that society was going to put over me, and I was going to lose what it was that I felt I really wanted to do in my life. So I had that passion, and what that passion did, and this is where I think a good life planner can be helpful, but and maybe my story can be helpful as well, is that just don't give up. Keep your eyes on the prize, and make sure you craft out of your daily life, of your weekly life, of your annual life, enough that you feel that dream is alive and it's going to happen. There ain't no way that dream is going to slip away. Ain't no way. And you want to have that kind of gumption and that kind of certitude and that kind of present reminder. So in my later days in financial planning, after I'd crafted the third question, I kept that third question in front of me. I would redo it. Sometimes every few weeks I would redo it. I would just go revisit it. I'd put it on the refrigerator. I wouldn't lose sight of it. And I think that's the most important thing in the early days, is to just keep going at it, craft it, make sure you have the boundaries up, so you are always working on it, and that's blossoming. It's happening. It's part of who you are. Don't lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that daily reminder. I know Louis mentions putting like a photograph on a mirror, but I can see with the 3 responses to your third question, because you live that. You live in the weather, you live a deeply spiritual life, and here you are writing the second illuminated manuscripts, which is really a series of 5. So you really are doing it. Do you have any maybe I don't want to know what's next, but I am curious for everyone, what is next in your life planning journey?
Well, it's really curious, because I haven't, right now it's still finish the books, finish the books, finish the books. And those books I think of as these 5. There are other books that I have in mind. One of them, there's a book on freedom and the 3 domains of freedom that I'm passionate about, I'm really excited about. But when I say to myself, finish the books, and I look at my third question, it's these books they're called Reflections on Spectacle Pond. And it's these books of photography and poetry, and delivering kind of where I've been and who my ancestors have been spiritually and culturally, as well as how they're channeled through my own experience. So I still have another year or 2 of finishing the books. So I'm not going to get distracted from that, even though I might be working on some other books at the same time. But I think what's happening for me, Laura, that's going to be a pretty astonishing place to feel I finished the books.
Yeah.
I finished the books. And I don't know exactly. I have some inklings. I don't know exactly. And it's funny that it comes at a time when my kids, they're 17 years old, right? They're graduating. They're going off to college. And so Kathy and I are going to be here alone, and so there's kind of this empty nest thing that's coming up, which will be quieter, will be less. There'll be less responsibility with the kids gone, and I don't fully know what that means. I think maybe it means that those 3 elements will deepen. And that I will understand them in a deeper, a wiser, a more authentic way. That's one thought I have for it. And the other thing is I've thought about, well, what changes in my circumstance? COVID has been really confining for me. I've been very careful. I've not wanted to, in any way, endanger whatever I can possibly give to the world. So I've really, as you know, I've kept very fierce boundaries around my health and my family and all of that. We've really been in lockdown for a couple of years practically. And so I'm itching to get out. I miss my friends in the life planning community enormously, just enormously, and all over the world. I miss them. And so there is part of me is thinking very much about community, spending more time in the UK as I normally do. Maybe we'll have a global conference in person. Maybe we'll see. Kathy and I spending more time in the 3 places where we have spent time living, so being out a bit more. So community, I think, is going to be intriguing, as well as the sense of greater peace and deepening. I don't know if I can say anything more, unless you've got some idea, knowing me and seeing into me as you do sometimes, that totally stuns me.
Not at all, George. No, no, it's wonderful to hear how disciplined you are about getting these next books out, because I think that that's part of the gift that you've modeled for others, is that you really need to follow through with living your life plan in each element, because it's dynamic, it changes, and that's why you keep revisiting it. But it's important to complete something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so. Very
Good.
much so. It's funny that you mentioned that, because my parents, I don't know where they got this idea. I never could understand it, but they always said, George, you never finish anything. So I have no idea where they got that, but I know that, and I've got a wildly active imagination, constantly coming up with new projects. But anyway, it is great to finish this. This is a 30-year project. It feels like a legacy project, very much as Kinder Institute and the life planning movement. Huge for me. Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been a lot of fun, George. I do have to ask you my favorite question of yours, which is, anything else?
And this time I think I've got a pretty clear no.
Okay. Well, I had to ask for everyone's sake. So thank you so much for taking the time, and we look forward to our next conversation.